Hi, everyone. Welcome to Tech Over Coffee. I'm Dave.
And I'm Ben.
We have some exciting topics to share with you today, but I guess before we get started, we'd like to note our sponsors, Chipola College in particular. They provide us this fantastic opportunity to look at technology and business concepts, this fantastic studio, and really encourage this environment of sharing ideas, research, and industry best practices. So thank you, Chipola College. So for topics, Ben, well, first of all, I see we got some coffee today. What kind of brew did you bring in for us?
Well, today, Dave, you are sipping on an original iced coffee flavor, and I am sipping on a French vanilla flavor. Um, it actually was not planned between the two. It just was random between that.
Good
So,
choice. And I see you got the memo on the hat as well. So
yes, it is. It's a hat day
yeah,
today.
good. Good that the memos are getting noted.
Yes.
I received mine as well. So for topics, what do you have in the queue for us?
Well, today we're talking kind of mainly about cybersecurity. I don't think we've really touched on this yet, and it's becoming a little bit in the news right now. There's a lot of talk about specific things in cybersecurity, as well as cybersecurity as a general topic is becoming more and more important in business practices. Um, as our society and our culture grows, technology is expanding at almost an exponential rate. I mean, if you look back in the 80s, we barely had computers. I believe in the 80s it was like the cathode ray tube computers, correct?
Right, and just from reading in the history books, I mean, you had these large mainframe systems, from the accounting data processing centers, which really led into the field of MIS, Management Information Systems, ITIS, as we know today, as you're talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. And we skip 40 years from the 80s to, 2020, and it's been, what, 7 years since we've had phones in our pockets, like computers that are full computers basically in our pockets. We have access to a massive database of information, the internet, and we can communicate with anyone in any part of the world just with ease. So it's a wonderful thing, but there are drawbacks to this infrastructure that has been built, and that is the security flaws that have to be updated like almost day by day, week by week, because of how fast this is expanding. New technology tends to have, and not to paint this as a negative connotation, but new technology has more flaws than older technology just because it's new. It's been undiscovered some of the potential flaws that would need to be adjusted. I'm sure a great example to say is on your phone, you maybe once a week, once a month, your phone tells you to update it. And usually that is from updating new security information. There's always new ways to access your phone as like a hacker, a hacker hacking things. And basically, cybersecurity is protecting your information, your hardware, and basically electronics in general, and keeping them from harm or abuse. And speaking of cybersecurity, as I said, since it is ever-changing and there are always cracks in the system, interesting things can happen. Check this out.
Hello, Ben? We're in a segment together. What do you mean you're hacking into my iPhone right now? Wow, you're right. I do need to keep up with my updates. So, great example. That was live. Impressive. I
The
think
power
I'm
of
a couple hours
technology.
behind. Yeah. Wow. Scary and sobering. But the thought of information security is so important. You look at technology as a foundation, as a backbone of competitive firms today. So with that technology leveraging and access, security becomes a driving consideration every day. And it could be with the integration of new apps that we're going to talk about, say with TikTok as an app out there.
Yes.
And the thought of how you would have an audit process, have a review process in place where you can make sure that any flaws or weaknesses are addressed. So these are important considerations. And I think what TikTok is probably our next topic
Yes.
to look on, this issue of information security, cybersecurity. So
Yes.
what a fantastic company about who's driving energy in the marketplace.
So to get started, TikTok is it's an application that you can install on your phone, much like YouTube or the app formerly known as Vine. It's basically a creative medium where people post different video creative posts that they do, usually over music. And I think it's very there's a lot. I think it's mainly used for like lip syncing to music and things, but it's also a form of creative comedy and things like that. So with that being said, you would think that this app is mainly dedicated to sharing information, sharing your videos and things like that, like your video comedy or your lip syncing and things like that. But currently, I believe TikTok is under fire right now in the US and in several other countries about it being a little too, I would say, friendly with user data. And that is similar to how Facebook got in trouble for basically what people call Facebook wiretapping, where the Facebook app is constantly recording audio if you don't set it up a certain way in your system settings. And if I were to say something like puppy supplies enough with my phone being around me, Facebook would start advertising puppy supplies to me. And very similar to how TikTok is in trouble for this as well. But I believe the largest problem is TikTok being a Chinese company. It's very similar to why the phone brand Huawei is banned in the US. And people believe that due to the Chinese government having an amount of political oversight on tech companies, that they could be abusing the big data of these apps and the phone brand for their own use.
So on my end, I just read about this topic on TikTok a week ago or so in the Wall Street Journal, and the article we're looking at today kind of builds on that, though, with a separate company. But Amazon thought, well, there's two differences with utilizing TikTok. Those that use them on their laptop or desktop, they thought that's not really an issue. They were, them speaking Amazon, a little nervous about TikTok's practices. But on their smart device, on their phone, say, same thing that Wells Fargo just noted, that they banned the use of TikTok as an app on a company phone because TikTok was gaining access to their clipboard, their note file, which seems interesting. Why
Yes.
would an app need access to that?
Right.
And so TikTok has said that they've stopped that practice, but it's an important thing to note that Amazon is so forward-leaning, so focused in the e-commerce environment that they were the first to actually report on this in the Wall Street Journal's from that author's or that reporter's section in their paper, and then now Wells Fargo just yesterday. So I think Amazon's pulled back as TikTok says they've stopped the practice, but I haven't seen that for Wells Fargo. It looks like they're still implementing no utilization of the TikTok app on a company phone.
I've heard rumors of it even being banned nationwide from the US. And I think that this case study brings up an interesting point and interesting thought on the idea of the growing importance of device security, specifically being you having full control over what apps are allowed to access your clipboard, what apps are allowed to access your microphone, your camera, and when they're allowed to access that. I think that it is part of a growing problem of device software having a little too much control over your device or access into your device.
Yeah, one thing interesting in the U.S. is you actually have to opt out of those steps, opt out of those privacy settings. Where in the UK, you actually have to opt into them. So the default is that you are out of it to begin with. In the U.S., it's enabled to begin with. So that's some good, important legislation down the road for maybe companies, those who champion best practices in the marketplace, those who actually can influence the decision making, to be able to follow that UK, that European practice of actually. Are you actually calling me again?
I did. Yeah.
Wow.
I was
okay,
just
well,
testing it.
Let's at least finish this segment. But the ability to opt in if we choose would be the preferred practice. So those initial settings are a little confusing, and TikTok looks like they've taken advantage of that, as others have, and hopefully they'll correct that practice. They said they have,
agree.
and we got to hold them to it.
And I think it'll bring up a nationwide discussion, and maybe make it more commonplace to question these access permissions as well.
Right, as apps grow in use, more and more creative programmers, if you will, may see vulnerabilities and unfortunately take advantage of those.
Right.
Which leads into our next topic.
Yes. Speaking of vulnerabilities, as cybersecurity continues to be the main focus of this episode, we'd like to talk about what's called bug bounties. So we all know that the word bug in terms of software and digital electronics is considered to be a flaw in software. So for example, if you're playing a video game, you could see a bug where the video game doesn't play correctly or something goes wrong that's not expected. A good example on your phone would be something like a photo not loading due to a software issue or a codec issue, or even an app crashing often. All of these are problems with bugs. And so one of the biggest problem with bugs is a bug is a flaw in cybersecurity, or a bug can be a flaw in cybersecurity. So it's not always something like my photo won't load or my video game isn't working properly. It could be my saved passwords can be accessed or something like that. So
providing software updates that we receive as well.
Right. And so it is becoming more and more prominent for software companies and hardware companies to make it an even larger effort to solve these bugs at a very fast pace, because if there's a flaw, say, in your cloud software, there's a flaw in everybody's cloud software. And if anyone who has malicious intent wants to take advantage of that, they can. And so solving these problems is important to do it quickly. It's important to solve these problems quickly.
Right. A couple of years ago, we actually had the choice to do the updates with our software and our system, say with our office environment, the suite of applications that we utilize for, say, schoolwork or in the work environment. Now they're pushed, so we actually don't often have a choice. It'll just take over when we try to turn on our laptop. We see it's in the process of updating. That's a positive step, but can you imagine a business with different locations throughout the global marketplace, or even say throughout a state, throughout a region of a country, and one place is vulnerable because they haven't proceeded with the updates required?
Right.
That could be a backdoor, a side door for a bad guy to actually enter and have access to their system, with everything being cloud-based, tied to an IP address. Once you have an access point, then it's quite challenging.
Right. And it's interesting because when it comes to that, if, let's say we're in a building, right, and there's a left and a right wing. If the right side of the building updates all of their software, and they make sure that everything's updated, all of the software security flaws are patched as often as possible, and the left side of the building, they kind of lag on that. Very similar to how the diffusion of innovation works. There's a lot of people who are always up to date. There's a lot of people who aren't up to date, and there's a middle ground of people that take some time to update. And so if those people are behind, let's say the left wing, a computer on the left side of the building gets an email that ends up being like a Bitcoin ransomware, where it encrypts all the files and basically says, if you don't give us $100, we're not going to help you get your files back, which basically is just a death sentence to the files. Now that that has happened, a lot of times a ransomware like that could be network-based, immediately spread to all the computers, and even if the right wing has updated fully, they may have only updated the email part of it. So now the left side has compromised the entire building and given every computer in the building ransomware.
Right, and as a manager, the initial thought, the lens you'll use as a leader is your local facilities. So your campus, wherever you have your businesses, wherever your offices are there, say adjacent to you. But the challenge with today's work environment is any company that's partnered with you, any company that's in that supply chain that's connected to your portal, connected to you for communications of sharing of information, they are vulnerable as well. And if they don't maintain their security, that is an access point as well. So you think about your great example of the left and the right, say wings of a building, that we can secure, but many leaders, many managers will often then forget anybody associated with your firm that has access to information, that those are vulnerable access points as well, and often need to be kept in mind. And so there's this whole industry out there of those who actually try to resolve, put out a bounty to solve these bugs, which is an interesting talking point.
So now that we've covered bugs, cybersecurity, and things, why solving bugs is important, we get into bug bounties. So basically, it's almost a form of grassroots outsourcing, and even just outsourcing in general, where let's say a company like Amazon has some flaws with their AWS, Amazon Web Services. It's basically a form of server system that allows for people to host web services on there.
The back end of a cloud environment.
Right. So let's say that Amazon Web Services has a bug that they're very busy. Their research and development department is busy. Their bug solving department is busy already. So a lot of the time they could put out what's called a bug bounty, and they can either find a private company that does this or release it to the public, which is what a lot of open source software does, like Linux and things like that. But basically, it says, we'll give $5,000 to the team that solves this bug, that fixes this flaw in the software. And so it makes people race to solve this bug. The bug usually gets solved quickly by people who are experienced in what's called black hat side of hacking, which is considered the more malicious side of hacking. There's a white and a black hat. White hat being ethical hacking, and black hat, like, the little symbols that you see on the web of the hacker in the like almost like the detective uniform with the black fedora, and he's like doing that. But so basically, experienced people who know a lot about vulnerabilities and understand where to find them and how to solve them, as well as how to abuse them, are the ones who fix these bugs. And so,
and the premise is a good one. So you have these bad guys, these black hat wearing people out there, say, that actually hack and take advantage, to find a better motivation for them to actually have them join as colleagues, leaders in organizations, to say, hey, let's try to solve these problems together. Don't just attack us. Let's work together to solve these problems throughout the marketplace. Kind of like give them a purpose that's better than just hacking, if you will. So put out that bounty. Say, hey, help us solve this.
Right. And theoretically, it would solve both the issue of having bugs and the issue of having rampant hackers. People who have malicious intent want to hack people's bank accounts, want to hack things that they can abuse for their own gain. So you take out the flaw, and you take out the person who abuses the flaw, the person who abuses the flaw instead gets payment, they get fulfillment, and they basically have a place in the world that they can really do things without having to go to jail, prison. And there's a lot of perks to this, but the problem is it's become very, I would say, cutthroat in the industry now.
Well, there's a lot of, this is a gig worker environment.
Yes.
So you have people that aspire to participate, but don't really have the skill set. So they can assist
Right.
with the low-hanging fruit. And the author of this article had an interesting perspective. There's only so many that are actually really proficient
Right.
at this skill set, that many of the gig workers being hired can solve some initial problems that maybe businesses could solve themselves internally and save that cost. And really the big challenges to address are only a set few that could actually help with those.
Right.
So how do you solve that dilemma?
Yeah, so the problem is there's like a top 2 or 3% of these black hat hackers that are really fixing bugs. They're like, they're powerhouses. They're getting these bug bounties, and then the rest of all these people are not getting enough. They're not getting enough
Maybe experience?
and in that not having enough exposure, not having enough work. And so the whole premise of it preventing crime is only preventing crime for those who are most experienced now. And so the ones that are less experienced are still stuck in this that cycle. And
So as a manager, it's nice to know that there are these firms, all these gig workers out there that can help address these larger security challenges.
right,
Also, a premise with the article was before you hire a company to solve these bigger problems, make sure you have your house in order.
right,
We were talking
Yeah.
offline earlier, something I had seen in organizations with consulting is the importance of patch management.
yes,
So if you're hiring this bug bounty firm, they're going to say, do you really want us to tell you your vulnerabilities? Are you ready
Right.
for this information?
Yeah.
Because if they haven't, they
you
don't
probably
have their
won't
house.
like what you hear.
That's right. Their house is in order to begin with. If they haven't kept their patch management up to date, which is hard to do, that's an
It is.
active
It's
cycle.
expensive as well for a company.
It is. That it could be creating more work for themselves than they actually are prepared for. So
Yes.
being well organized up front, having a process internally that you can solve yourself prepares you for these next steps.
Yes. So it's a difficult kind of balancing act, and hopefully in the future we will see this kind of mellow out. Maybe there will be more chances for people who are less experienced but still want to do something like this, and hopefully that this will help to break that cycle of malicious hacking and help further technology as a whole.
So great topics today, Ben.
Yes.
So some great brew, some great
Yes.
topics. I think one we have in the queue for our next Tech Over Coffee segment is the thought of, I think Bill Gates put out maybe 20 considerations for aspiring entrepreneurs.
Yes.
So that is a fascinating topic for us to look at during our next segment.
Absolutely. So thank you for watching or listening, depending on what platform you are. We hope you are doing well, and if you like this podcast, please follow us or subscribe or whatever format it works for you on whatever platform. And again, this podcast is sponsored by Chipola College. If you want more information, please go to chipola.edu. Thank you again for listening. I'm Ben,
I'm Dave.
and have a good day.
Thank you.